Welcome back, everybody. It's another episode of Load Up and Woke, and we're talking about the nervous system. We're talking about the heart and the difference between perceiving through the heart and the right brain, which is our intuition, sometimes called the heart mind, versus the analytical left brain and the survival state, or the survival brain sometimes it's called. So I want to start off by saying that there are different levels of perception, or bundles of neurons in the heart that actually perceive things directly, and there's also some in the gut, and the ones in the gut, obviously, you get that gut feeling about something. And I've made another video about this, but I'm wanting to condense the material here for a quicker video. So I'm going to get right into it. The power of love that we talk about in spiritual contexts, and how it's so powerful for transforming, has to do with this mechanism of perceiving through the heart. And when we're in that heart state and you perceive something through love, you're actually becoming one with that thing that you perceive. And that's why if you're constantly in a state of loving God, you're becoming one with God. And for some people, they do it with other things. They love money. They love money, and they're constantly thinking about money, and bam, now they're attracting money. But the difference is with the left brain and the survival state, which is activated through the sympathetic nervous system and the ergotropic mechanism of the brain, which are a set of neurochemicals that basically activate the fight or flight. And people very often, very commonly, go throughout the day in an unnecessary sort of just habitual or conditioned fight or flight state, or some level of survival state, so that you are having to, for example, when you're in that survival state, everything is perceived as either a threat, an opportunity, or neutral. When something is neutral, it means it's neither a threat or an opportunity. It's not going to be food, it's not going to be a job, or it's not going to be something like that. But it's also not going to hurt you, so you don't even spend any time on that. So yeah, when we're in the survival state, neutral things, so-called neutral, don't get any attention. You don't really spend the energy and the time to really be there with that thing. So that a tree is simply just another tree, and that the moon is just the moon that I've seen 100 times, and there's nothing like amazing about it anymore, because we're in the survival state, which wants to either identify threats or opportunity. And therefore, when the left brain, and we're perceiving the world through the left brain, we're basically just converting raw sensory information into data that can be analyzed and categorized into specific sections. So that, like, tree, I've seen it 100 times, it can go right here. Anything that's an opportunity, bam, that gets moved over here. And anything that's a threat, that's like a big red letters, avoid that, and activate even more fight or flight response. And this becomes a cycle and a loop. And there is a time and a place where it's appropriate to be in the sympathetic nervous system, such as, like, if you're competing in sports, or if you actually are in the jungle surviving, for example, or if you're at work in a very fast-paced environment where you need to get a lot of things done quickly. It may behoove you to be in that state, but it also, in these arenas, such as sport and business, there's a higher state of parasympathetic, in other words, calm state of nervous system, where you can operate by perceiving through the heart, which is perceiving directly at the level of feeling, at the level of the field, rather than the particle. In quantum physics, it will be the wave rather than the particle. So it's not the physical forms, but the energetic patterns that generate that form. And therefore, you can actually anticipate things much better, much easier. And this is described as being in the zone. Like if you were playing basketball and you're just like in the zone, you can shoot and know exactly as soon as you let go of the ball, you know that it's going in. And you can sort of have an awareness of where all the other players are on the board or on the court. And you know, you can do those things where you just pass without looking because you're in a zone. You're no longer, your left brain is not getting in the way by trying to analyze and label everything. But so when we are in that left brain, we're actually pushing things out of us. We're label every time we label a thing, when we perceive something and give it a label immediately, we separate that thing from us. Versus when we're in a love state, perceiving through the heart, you perceive something, you're actually becoming one. You're allowing that thing to become one with you, to touch you. You're feeling it. And in our everyday lives, this sort of survival mechanism, which becomes habituated and activated even when it's not necessary, becomes, rather than a strategy for discerning, which is what the left brain is for, which is, you know, if you're in a jungle, you want to be able to discern a fruit that's poisonous versus a fruit that's actual food, a threat versus an opportunity. In society, it becomes a judgment, not so much a discernment. It becomes a good or bad, right? In the jungle, you wouldn't say that that's a bad tree just because it produces poisonous fruit. You would just simply avoid that tree. You wouldn't eat it. If it has spikes, you would know not to run near it because you might, you know, it's a threat. It's simply a threat. It's not good. It doesn't have evil intent. I mean, it's not bad. It doesn't have some evil intention. It's not actively trying to trick you into eating it and killing you. But in society, through this conditioning and cultural indoctrination, things become judgment and sort of lending themselves to drama and comparison and all of these things that lead to some level of suffering. And that correlates with some level of fight or flight nervous system state where you're activated this ergotropic mechanism of neurochemicals that keep you in this survival state where you perceive yourself as one individual separated from the rest of the world that needs to survive and at all costs, needs to survive at all costs and continue to separate, and therefore you want to label things, labeling it and pushing it outside of you. But what do we say when we can relate with something? That's what we say when we can actually accept something without giving it a label that separates it from us. We see something that we can accept, and all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, I can relate with that. That means I can see myself as that. I can see a little bit of me in that. I have a certain oneness with that. But if it's something we don't like, all of a sudden, oh, I don't get that. I don't understand that. Or that's horrible, or that's terrible, or I would never. And then, bam, immediately we're separating ourselves from that. And in the love version of all this, you would see something so-called terrible or horrible as simply another spectrum or another frequency or another version of the same love. Similar to when we look at a rainbow and we see different colors, but it's still just light. Everything is light. All there is light bouncing off into, atoms bouncing off light, giving us this sensory information, and we see different colors, but none of the colors are bad or ugly or evil. Similar to that, when we perceive through love, there's a full spectrum of love. Love takes on many, many forms, some of which may appear a bit rougher on the outside, maybe uglier on the outside, but through the eyes of love, we can get to the inner essence of each thing directly and experience directly what is actually there, the true reality of it. So that when we look at somebody that we might judge if we're on that survival state and push them away, in that loving state, you see that same person and realize, oh, if they're angry, that means they're hurt. If they're hurt, they need love. Or if they look or seem terrible, they might be poor. If they're poor, they need love. And so love becomes that through which we perceive everything through that and as that, and we want to give that. We want to give love to everything, because the God and all that is loves all that is. All that is loves all that is. There's a full spectrum, all-inclusive love. And that's something that we can tune into when we are able to relax our nervous system enough to override the fight or flight conditioned habitual responses and get into a parasympathetic nervous system, or just simply call it just relaxation. Anything that helps us maintain relaxation, which the breath is probably the number one thing consistently in your life every moment of the day that you can turn to and use that to calm down and return to a oneness state, a loving state where you're able to perceive directly through the antenna that you generate with love. With love, when you combine, where there's coherence between the heart and the brain, there's something called entrainment, and there's a harmony and an entrainment that happens that actually amplifies the entire electromagnetic system of your body-mind network system mechanism, and feeds it all this amplification, gives it the juice for the antenna, the body-mind antenna, which I talk about in my other videos, allowing it to go above the conditioned social collective sort of rat race frequency and go into a frequency of oneness to tune into and pick up this broadcast from God, from the greater consciousness, which is like the mother morphic field of all the morphic fields, and it has this all-inclusive love, this oneness, this unity, right? That's what they're looking for now in quantum physics. It's like the unified theory of everything. If only they could just look at God and say, and look at love and say it like that. No, but they need a mathematical formula for it. So someday maybe, but right now we know that what they're looking for is God, or it doesn't have to be called God, but undifferentiated source consciousness, or the greater infinite consciousness, or the mother morphic field of all the morphogenetic fields. Just like a hive has a beehive has a morphic field that controls and organizes all the behavior of all these little, insects that exhibit such complex patterns of behavior and yet have such tiny little brains. But what do they have? Instead of big brains, they have antennas. They got two little antennas that are picking up the broadcast from the mother field. That's what our heart-mind connection allows us to do. It allows our antenna, which is mostly invisible or inside the brain with the pituitary, the pineal gland, and the heart. There's a lot of the endocrine system involved. But simply knowing that when you're in that state of relaxation and ease and flow, what they call the flow state now, or the ease state, according, heart math has a lot of empirical scientific research for all those that require the numbers and the empirical, the hard facts. You can look at the Heart Math Institute or search ergotropic mechanism and see what you get, because there's a lot of data and proof that relaxation allows us to enter this state where we're no longer responding to the external stimuli in such a distressing way. I'm going to wrap it up here. There's much more to be said, but the bottom line is that perceiving through the heart and the heart-mind, the right side, intuitively, allows you to perceive directly and become one with that which is around you, rather than separating it as like a survival, primate would have to do in order to survive in the jungle, to separate an external world from the poor me that needs to be saved. Much love to everybody. Please share. Any comments, any questions are much appreciated. Be well. Sat Nam.